I'd like to turn to our newest guest, Rob Mitchell, who is the state coordinator for drug courts in New Mexico. Hello, Rob. How are you?
I am doing well. Very good to be here.
Thank you for coming to Justice Speaks.
Thank you.
I'd like you to start by telling me a little about yourself.
Sure. Well, I've been in New Mexico for over 20 years and working in the integration of criminal justice and behavioral health. And before that, I actually was working in faith-based institutions for quite a while with youth and doing a lot of crisis intervention work. And that actually has continued. But that's what actually brought me to New Mexico. And then,
Where were you before that?
so I was in Ohio before that.
Well, there's an improvement, said the guy from Michigan.
Well, I grew up in Wisconsin, so across the lake
Okay.
from where you would have been.
But you were Wisconsin, then Ohio, and you went to New Mexico for a
Yes.
job?
Went to New Mexico, right, working with youth in a faith-based organization. Got really stayed connected, I should say, to crisis work, because I did a lot of that. I had a background in both law enforcement as well as EMS, first responder, and also had, worked in Air Force as well for a stint there. But was very engaged and involved in crisis work. So when I was working with youth, that kind of translated into being involved in things like mass school shootings and that sort of thing, where there were crisis events involving youth.
Okay. And so how did that lead to you becoming involved in treatment courts?
Right. Well, so I first was the Alternative Sentencing Division Director for San Juan County. So I worked for local government when I left the faith-based organizations, and worked in a jail-based treatment center that they had there. It was a 28-day jail-based treatment center focused on primarily alcohol issues. We later expanded because of a significant methamphetamine issue that we were having in that particular area in New Mexico, where we had so many women, more in the state, with women that had their children taken away because of methamphetamine issues. And so we started a program with that particular population because of the success we'd seen with the alcohol intervention programs that we were doing. And so I did that for about a dozen years, and then our state Children, Youth, and Families Department wanted to bring that type of success to the juvenile facilities.
Okay.
So I took a governor's appointment to work with the long-term confinement facilities and our reintegration centers in New Mexico for juveniles.
Okay.
And so did that for a couple of years. The political winds changed a little bit. They weren't as interested in providing those kind of services, and wanted to move kind of more back toward a correctional approach. And so that's when I went to work for treatment courts, to stay aligned with that true integration of criminal justice and behavioral health best practices.
Okay. And so how did you become the state coordinator then?
Well, when I first went to work for our Administrative Office of the Courts, I actually started in creating a new program in one of our jurisdictions. And then there happened to be some shuffling of the deck, so to speak, at the state level, and an individual that I had been working with for probably 20 years on policy issues said, you should apply for this statewide position, and I did. And I've been doing
then
that
you
for
became the coordinator.
I did, and I've been doing that for almost 8 years now.
So what is involved in your job and your work?
Well, currently, that's actually an excellent question, and it's one that I ask myself every day because I'm still trying to figure it out. If I was trying to summarize it, I think I would say being flexible and responsive. I know that that's a platitude, so I will get more detailed than that. But when I first went to work at the state level, it was myself as a program manager. We had basically one person helping me, and we are now a team of 7. And so our state has really seen the value of investing in our treatment courts. And so I preface what I'm about to answer with that. because what we do every day, we have one staff person, for example, who the main focus is just making sure that people have resources to keep their treatment courts going. So we have a fiscal person. I work on a lot of policy things. I try to generate, funding and that sort of thing, but we have somebody that just focuses on serving our courts and making sure they get those resources pushed out.
Right, and you were telling me earlier that you're working on updating your standards,
We are.
and that's under your offices, is that
It is
correct?
as well.
And that's for how the treatment courts will work in New Mexico.
Yes, that's correct.
Do you also put on conferences?
We do. We do conferences every other year. We're looking forward to 2024 because we'll actually be back in person again. In doing them every other year, our last two conferences, so going back a few years now, we've gone virtual. So,
Okay, and how did that go?
the first year we had some technological problems because of the platform that we were using, and it was, for the end user, it wasn't a great experience.
Okay.
We had a good turnout, but it wasn't the best experience. The next year we used a different platform and had, again, good turnout, had some good reflection at the end. Personally, I think that getting people together in the same room
I
makes a
agree with
difference.
you. I think it's very clear. It's not just the educational session, it's the sharing of knowledge between the individuals. Certainly, when I was putting together what we call in Michigan a sobriety court, which is a DWI drug court nationally, part of the way I ended up developing it wasn't just the training, but it was the conversation that I had with people who had just started up because they were relatively new in the country, and what their experiences had been. And immediately, training was saying, do it for 9 months. And my discussion said 9 months wasn't enough. You needed at least 18 months, and you needed some additional phasing. So the training taught me one thing, but the conversations taught me how to improve on that training. And I think the in-person conferences do that, and I'm glad to hear you're going back. How many people do you think you're going to have at that?
Well, the last one that we did in person was the largest that we had in our state, and that was about a little over 400, maybe 430,
Good sized conference.
something like that.
It's judges and criminal justice professionals of all sorts, right?
Correct. Everybody that would be typically making up a multidisciplinary team. And what we did our last conference that I thought was particularly helpful was that we as the state paid for the registration for teams to attend.
Oh.
So working with our New Mexico Association of Drug Court Professionals.
Who we did an interview with, by the way.
With Judge Jaramillo.
Yep.
Right. And working with them, we negotiated so that we could pay for a team registration and really then encourage everybody to bring all of their multidisciplinary team. And then we seated them together at, the massive round tables that we have in the convention room. And
Was this in Phoenix?
it was in Albuquerque.
No.
And
Sorry.
yeah.
I apologize.
But yes, Albuquerque. And we were intentional not only about the topics, knowing where our treatment courts had some areas to consider, and have the dialogue. So we knew the speakers and we knew an idea of what they were going to be covering. And with the NMADCP board, we created a list of discussion questions that we could have at the table.
Okay.
So to kind of get the ball rolling. But really kind of our goal at that particular conference was best practices, but really getting the team connected.
So how can people find information about your conference, which is upcoming?
Well, so our next conference it's usually in October, it'll be 2024.
Okay, so you haven't got anything up.
We don't have
If someone
anything
were
up.
looking to go, how would they find out about it?
I think the best place would be to go to our nmcourts.gov website, and we have a section on there that would have training opportunities. We do, of course, our statewide conference every other year, but internally with our administrative office of the courts, and often in connection with our NMADCP, we'll do other summits, and we have what we call guild meetings. We have treatment court judges guilds and coordinator guilds and treatment professional guilds, and So we'll sometimes do those in person often.
By guilds, you mean it's separate trainings for those individuals as opposed to the whole team?
Yes, we're trying to create learning communities
Okay.
within those professions that are of course guided by best practices, but we're trying to create a networking for those individuals that are providing those services.
That makes a lot of sense. So in addition to the guilds and the annual or the biannual conference, do you do other training?
We do. The guild meetings actually for the coordinators, we meet every other week virtually and then together as we can. We're working right now on we're focusing a lot of attention, I should say, on our what we call field support officers. So the ones that are actually doing the field work for our treatment court professionals. Might be supervision agencies like probation and parole. It could be in our state, misdemeanor compliance programs handle all of the magistrate court supervision. And so we're providing some special training for that group along the lines of the concept of enclosed cognition. So how the officer may see him or herself by the way they're dressed when they go in the field and how they're perceived by other people. And so that brings into conversations like, whether people are armed or how they, if they're wearing tactical gear on the outside versus on the underside of their shirts or those kind of things. So we do training on that type of thing that's trying to consider not only where we are currently, but where the field needs to be going. So yeah, we do a lot of those types of things.
So how are the treatment courts funded in New Mexico?
So we have been funded by the general fund for many years.
Right.
It was not uncommon in the past to get federal funding to start a court and then go to the general
Right.
fund and ask, for the money. About 5 years ago, I want to say maybe 6, we were able to convince the legislature to give us 5% of the liquor excise tax distribution.
That Texas has just done that. That's something that I would hope that anyone listening to this podcast who's not from New Mexico or Texas picks up on, because that allows for a great deal of funding.
It does, and as much as you might think that things like COVID might put a dent in that, we found it to be recession-proof.
That's really good. So what do you think the greatest accomplishment of your office has been?
Wow. Well, there's so many directions I could go with that because, we have one person that focuses on certification, one person that focuses on data and analytics, one person that focuses on
I'll take more than one, but
So-
I'm really looking for something that you're especially proud of.
Yeah, well, I guess the reason I answered that way is because I think the team that we've developed would be that answer.
Okay.
Because we've been very intentional about bringing people on board. Number one, that are subject matter experts in areas that serve our treatment courts, but serve the unity of the team.
Mm-hmm.
But they're also individuals that they really understand the philosophy, the why behind the treatment court. So any one of those team members can go out anywhere in our state and bring that passion of why we're doing what we're doing. And I think that's really important. New Mexico, we still have not only urban areas, but frontier areas. And so in New Mexico, there are people that are providing services in treatment courts that, apart from our office or these guilds that we're creating, they can feel very alone, very much on an island. And I really believe that the strength of our team and what they bring to our communities would be what I would say I'm most proud of.
What do you think are your greatest challenges?
So I think for challenges, when I look at our treatment courts, I would say that there's our professionals in the justice system and the behavioral health systems are overwhelmed constantly by a barrage of competing priorities that come from, of course, the work that they're doing because we're dealing with a high-risk ID population. But it seems like everybody who has a website or influence is telling them to do something and stop everything else and pick up this mantle and do it all. And That may not be a politically correct answer, but I really do see, judges that are saying they want to do their best job, but doing what? Is it going to be deflection? Is it going to be diversion? Is it going to be pretrial? Is it going to be reentry? Is it going to be treatment courts? Is it going to be, there are so many things out there right now because the justice system has been moving and shaking, and for all the good that's going on, we don't have more judges to get all this done. We don't have more attorneys. We don't have more, defense attorneys or prosecuting attorneys, and we don't have more treatment providers.
The demand is high and the
That's
resources
exactly
are not
right.
as high.
That's exactly right. We as a justice system are trying to get it so right, but by identifying the gaps, it doesn't mean we're identifying the professionals to all of a sudden be there. We have the same number of judges, we have actually less attorneys now than we had just a few years ago. So, you try to get support for drug courts and they're saying, we just need to close cases. We need to process. We don't have time for that or this or, so it's a struggle. The justice system, I think, is really struggling to get its legs under it with all the good things that are available.
So where do you see problem-solving courts or treatment courts in New Mexico 10 years from now?
Well, I see them as being, continuing to be a very important part of the solution, but being the leaders of the cooperative effort toward integration of best practices all across the board. Our department, we used to be the problem-solving courts department. About 3 or 4 years ago, we actually became, within our administrative office of the courts, we're the Department for Therapeutic Justice. So we're taking a little bit of a broader view, saying, treatment courts work really well and they work for this population. One of our new staff members, for example, we're introducing what we're calling a risk needs responsibility framework. And we're starting with, we have 5 pilot sites right now, different jurisdictions in New Mexico, where we're working with our magistrate courts and these misdemeanor compliance programs so that everybody that comes in will be screened and assessed. And it's similar to the multi-track treatment court model, except we're partnering with probation services because we recognize that the courts, we don't need to take on all those other 3 quadrants and then hire staff and try to figure out how to do it. We're partnering with our misdemeanor compliance programs, those probation services, so that everybody is getting the right treatment or whatever they need, dosage and duration of supervision or treatment at the right time for the right reasons in the right way. And that's kind of that's where we're headed with this initiative. So we really do view treatment courts as being the best option for that high-risk, high-need population, but then helping the rest of our system figure out how to manage in a responsible way the resources that we have that are linked to the individual's needs.
Listen, I want to thank you for coming on Justice Speaks. I really appreciate how much you've added to the conversation.
Thank you.
We're done.